Chapter 131. Betty Anderson is more suitable than you. She hung up the phone, went back to her office and picked up his bag, then said to Mia, who had invited her to dinner. Mia, my apologies. I won't be able to accompany you to the cafeteria at noon today. I need to go out for a while. Sure, go ahead. After she left school, she took a taxi and went to Anderson's group. She wanted to directly go upstairs, but someone stopped her. She walked to the front desk and reported her name. Hello, I'm here to look for your CEO, John Anderson. I've already made an appointment with him. You can call him to confirm it. Miss, please wait for a moment. I'll call the secretary office to confirm. After waiting for 3 minutes, Laura was allowed to pass. This was the second time she had come to the company. The last time she had come was 5 years ago, when her mother had been so depressed that she hadn't known what to do, so she had thought for the first time that she would have to ask him, her nominal father, for help. But that day, he hit her on the head. Father? She would rather not have a father like him. Under the guidance of the secretary, she entered John Anderson's office. It's been 5 years, and this place is still the same. Without waiting for John Anderson to speak, she walked over and sat down on the sofa. John Anderson stood up and left the desk, going to the other side of the sofa. I saw the picture. He went straight to the point. However, Laura didn't mind. She didn't come here to reminisce about the past. So, child, do you really plan to be this ungrateful and unrepentant? Can't you just listen to me once? Leave William Walton, leave Philadelphia, and walk far away. Isn't that better? Laura said with cold smile. In this world, only he treats me well. I finally managed to grab hold of a trace of humanity and warmth, and now I have a shoulder to rely on. Why could I leave? If you were me, would you give up the man and choose something difficult? I think you should understand me at this point. After all, you abandoned your first girlfriend, joined the Anderson clan. You know how to weigh the pros and cons. This is probably the only advantage I inherited from you. The matter of me and your mother is not as simple as you think. John Anderson frowned. I am telling you all of this now for your own good. In that case, you'd better withdraw your good intentions. I don't need them at all. Laura, John Anderson sighed. All these years it hasn't been easy for me either. I'm already old, and I still have to sit in this position and busy myself to death every day. Actually, I didn't cause this. It has nothing to do with me, she interrupted him. Anything else you want to say? John Anderson knew how stubborn he was, so he nodded. All right, since you are not willing to leave, then you can continue to stay in Philadelphia. It's just that, you have to know, you are an illegitimate daughter, and not worthy of William Walton. Even if he is chasing after you right now, it is only because of a moment of novelty. After this period of time, he will change his target, and you will only have injuries. You want to get back to the point? If that's the case, then you can shut up. I've been stubborn since I was young. I wanted to tell you, you can't do it. You're too incompatible with William Walton. Give this opportunity to Betty Anderson. Betty Anderson is more suitable than you to be the young mistress of Walton family. She scoffed in disdain. Her gaze on John Anderson was like a sword. John Anderson felt extremely uncomfortable after being looked at by her. He spoke with a calm voice. Think about it yourself. With William Walton's status, if he were to marry an illegitimate daughter, would he be targeted in the future? He can bear it for you for a while, but can he bear it for the rest of his life? This label on your body, it's something that can never be removed. Do you understand? Her eyes were cold. If you don't open your mouth, I will also discuss this topic with you. The reason I agreed to come see you today is because I want you to take care of the precious daughter in your eyes, Betty Anderson. Don't let her throw up her face to pester me for men. If you say that I do not have the qualifications, then Betty Anderson does not have the qualifications either. In William Walton's eyes, I am not even a daughter from Anderson family, so he will not treat me as an illegitimate daughter. Forget about me, not planning to give William Walton to Betty Anderson. Even if I was willing, he won't accept her. Do you really think that your daughter is a fairy or a goddess who comes from the heaven? If she takes off all her clothes and stand in front of William Walton and get his attention successfully without saying a word, I will immediately withdraw. After all, I will not pick up other people's broken shoes. I'm done with what I want to say. In the future, don't look for me anymore. I really don't want to have anything to do with your Anderson family. After all, I feel sick when I see you guys. She got up and walked to the door. John Anderson gnashed his teeth in anger. You wretched girl. She opened it and looked back. Don't think of yourself as my father anymore. Touch your own conscience and ask yourself, are you worthy? She gave him a cold look and left. Coming out of Anderson's group, she felt relieved in her heart, because John Anderson was really angry just now. If those guys from Anderson family were unhappy, she would be happy. As she descended the steps, she saw that there were quite a few people gathered around the circular flower bed not far away. As they passed by, they heard the sounds of fighting coming from inside. A sharp female voice shouted, Tom, you are a bastard. This name. She stopped and looked through the crowd. This Tom was really the one she knew. However, why would the dignified training department manager beat someone up here? She squeezed into the crowd, lowered her head, and saw that the one who was being kicked was no one else but Amy, the person she helped to find a job for. Amy curled up into a ball, hugged her head and shouted, "You are a bastard." "Even I'm a bastard. I've helped you before too. You sold yourself to me, and now you still want to pretend to be noble? You bitch, you fucking bitch, you want to start over? I want to let all your colleagues know that you are just a hooker." There were many people around, but no one helped her. Probably because of Tom's current fierce look, it was quite scary. After that, she took her phone and dialed 911. "I want to make a report. On the roadside in front of the Andersons Group's entrance, a man is beating up a woman. It seems like he wants to kill her." Hearing that someone had called the police, Tom's gaze quickly swept across the crowd. He shouted coldly, "Which bastard called the police? Get the hell out of here, bitch. Mind your own business." Chapter 132. "You must be careful." Just as Laura was about to walk, Amy, who was lying on the ground, immediately shouted, "Tom, just go. When the police come over, I will definitely sue you for attempted murder. Anyway, there are so many witnesses here." Hearing Amy's words, Tom spat at Amy, who was on the ground, turned and left quickly. He didn't want to get into trouble either. The surrounding people were still watching. Laura squeezed into the crowd and helped her up. The moment she saw her, Amy's eyes reddened, but her mouth revealed a smile. "It sounds like your voice." Because there were too many people spectating, and there were even people taking photos, she supported Amy out of the crowd. Laura brought her to the coffee shop beside the Andersons group. Perhaps because it was lunchtime, there weren't many people here. The two of them sat in the seats under the parasol by the door. Amy said, "Laura, let me buy you a coffee. Actually, I always wanted to invite you out. You helped me find such a stable job and solve the urgent problem. I should be treating you to a meal instead. But I paid the hospital fee when I received the salary last month." She smiled wryly and said, "I don't have money. How could I treat you a meal? I just happened to meet you at noon today. I can't treat you to a meal, but coffee won't be a problem." She frowned. "No need. I don't like owing things to others. This time you're going to invite me, but next time I'm going to invite you back. It's too troublesome." "You don't owe me anything. A few days ago, I found out that the person who revealed the photo of me and Tom was really not you. All along, I thought it was you who did it. Sorry." "Who did that?" she asked. "It's Annie. She knew about my relationship with Tom and felt that I had played a trick on her, so she was angry. That's why she set me up on the company's forums." She asked, "Did she say it herself?" Amy nodded. "You've seen her?" "Yeah, recently. She was tortured by Tom. Thus, she came to find me once. We chatted in depth for a while and talked about some of the grievances between us. In truth, if it wasn't for Tom, there wouldn't have been any grievances between us. Recently, Tom hated women a lot. He said that all the women are evil. Annie exposed the relationship between him and me, causing his reputation to go down the drain. And because of me, the company directly started investigating him, which caused him to be fired." "He is fired? You mean Tom was expelled?" She nodded. "Yes." Looking at the bruises on Amy's temples and the corner of her mouth, that color probably wasn't something that had just been injured today, she said again, "Today, this isn't the first time he has hit you, right?" She bit her lip and nodded. Laura said, "Why didn't you call the police?" "He said that if I called the police, he would tell the police that I was his mistress and that I had cheated him of his money. At that time, I would have to go to jail too, and my family would still be waiting for me to earn money to save my dad's life. I could endure the beating, but I can't go to jail." Amy looked at her. "Anyway, I'm already like this. There's nothing to be afraid of. I can recognize you by your voice. I wonder if he can recognize your voice too." "Did he see you just now?" "If he sees you, he'll definitely deal with you. He's crazy right now, so you must be careful. He can't make things difficult for me." Amy seemed to have thought of something. "Oh, right, the person in the photo yesterday was you, right?" She was somewhat surprised. She was not surprised that John Anderson and John Anderson could recognize her, but how did this Amy recognize her? Without waiting for her to ask, Amy continued, "You also have the pair of black leather shoes of the person in the photo." She heaved a sigh of relief. She had guessed it from here. Indeed, not many people could wear this kind of shoes nowadays. She probably bought it when she was in her 3rd year in college. In the past, Judy had even said that she gave the shoes a vintage style. Amy said, "When I first saw the photo, I was rather shocked, but later on, I actually understood it. If the Zoe really had a relationship with Mr. Walton, then she would have been promoted long ago. But you, every time Mr. Walton appears in front of the employees of our department, you always seem to be here. You guys coordinated well. We were all tricked. You don't need to worry about the photo thing. We will deal with it. As for you, what are you going to do?" This could be considered as indirectly admitting to Amy that she was the woman in the photo. I haven't thought about it yet," she sighed. "When did this start?" "He came to me the day after he was fired, wanting to do that kind of thing with me. I rejected him because I didn't let him in my house, so he hit me for the first time in front of the room I was renting." Amy said as she gave a wry smile. "Today is the 4th time, and also the first time he has caused trouble at the entrance of the company. I think this is probably my retribution. I have to pay for all the mistakes I made in the past. I deserve it. Can you not be so passive? Do you think that just because you keep silent, he will let you go? If he comes to the company to stir up trouble every day, will you still be able to do your job? No matter what you've done in the past, it's illegal for him to hit you now. If you don't use legal weapons to protect yourself, he won't let you have a good life in the future. As Amy said this, she became slightly absent-minded. But if? There's no if. You and Annie must retaliate. If not, he will bully you two for the rest of your lives. After all, you did not dare to speak at the beginning, so you might not be able to do so in the future. You can't be cowardly. She had a deep understanding of this from her mother. To be honest, I'm in a bit of a mess right now. I really don't know what to do. Do you have any good ideas? Laura said after thinking. Go and find Annie. You should deal with him together with her. He would do this again. Both of you, do not alert the enemy. You must get his evidence, endure for the last time, and then sue him in court. And if he tells against me, after all, I really did take his money. Even if he wanted to sue you, he had to show evidence to say that you cheated. You don't have a contract, you don't have a document. On what basis are you cheating on him? When a man chased after a woman, he would help her father treat his illness and give her money. After all, he was willing to pay these to get a woman. It wasn't you who forced him to give it to you. What is there to be afraid of? Hearing her words, Amy became even more confident. She was right. She gazed at Laura, and she was very grateful for her help. She had to admit that she was indeed braver, tougher, and more worthy of being loved than herself. Chapter 133, Mr. Walton treats you so well. On the bus to school, she sat in the back and watched a girl who was scanning the news that William Walton had clarified the scandal between Miranda and him. The corner of her lips lifted slightly as she turned her head to look out the window. Just now, at the entrance of the coffee shop when they were separating, Amy asked her, Laura, why did you help me? At that time, Laura did not reply but only faintly smiled. However, she herself knew clearly that she was helping Amy because she just didn't want a second Elizabeth Green to appear in this world. Humans lived for themselves, but both her mother and Amy seemed to have always lived for others. For the sake of others, they could sacrifice their own bodies. For the sake of others, they could disregard their own feelings. For the sake of others, they could endure humiliation that no one could endure. However, even though these people were their most loved ones, they shouldn't do that, because that was unfair for themselves. There were too many ways to protect her own relatives and take care of them. She didn't want Amy to be like her mother, who did the wrong thing again and again. In the afternoon, she got off work and went out to the car which William Walton had sent to pick her up. At first, she thought that this car would probably go back to the Walton family villa. But when she saw that the car had passed by a fork in the road leading to the Walton family villa, she asked curiously, Where are we going? Miss Green, the boss only said that he wanted me to bring you to C Studio. C Studio? She was wondering, wasn't that the same place that made her dress up like a flower last time only to be mocked by William Walton? The driver didn't have much information, so it wasn't good for her to ask. When the car had just arrived at the studio's door, the boss personally came out to bring her into the studio. When she entered the room, she discovered that William Walton was no longer there. However, it was the boss of the studio who said, Miss Green, please take a seat. The formal attire has been prepared. We will put on makeup and go to the banquet. To the banquet? She sat down passively, took out her phone, and called William Walton. When the call connected, she asked gently, William Walton, what the hell are you doing again? What kind of banquet is it? A small gathering organized by the old man at home. You better dress yourself prettily. You don't even discuss it with me. Will the result change after discussion? In any case, if you are willing to go, you go. Even you are unwilling, I will still let you come. She pursed her lips and said, You are annoying. She hung up. The boss standing aside could not help but raise his eyebrows in surprise. This was the first time he saw someone dare to speak to Mr. Walton in such a manner. The two words William Walton had never been called out by anyone before. It seemed this young lady wasn't simple. He had to be careful around her. He personally went to get a gray peony embroidered attire. Miss Green, Mr. Walton specially chose this attire for you. Did Mr. Walton choose this? She was surprised. He came here before? The last time we dressed for you, Mr. Walton had booked this attire from a famous French attire designer. Half a month ago, the attire was delivered to our shop and it has been stored in the glass cabinet at the back. Mr. Walton has good taste. In the past half-month, there have been countless young ladies who have come to buy this attire. But this designer has always made handmade and embroidered attire. It's one of a kind and has long been in your possession. Mr. Walton treats you so well. She stared at this attire, frowning. Last time she wore a dress, William Walton had mocked her for the whole night. This time, he ordered an attire with the color of an old granny for her? He must have been playing with her on purpose. What a lunatic. I don't wear this, she said calmly as she shook her head. The owner became anxious. Don't, Miss Green. These are the clothes that Mr. Walton specified. If you did not wear them, I will be in trouble. It's not that exaggerated. He shouldn't be so bored. Really, Mr. Walton has called to tell me, if he doesn't see you wearing the attire tonight, then I don't need to open my shop tomorrow. Laura was speechless. What did he mean? Last time he mocked her, so he wanted to do it again? Miss Green, this attire is too compatible with your temperament. If you didn't have to wear it, it would be a pity. Was this boss mocking her for being so old? But when she saw his pitiful appearance, she felt a little helpless. She stood up and picked up her attire. I'll go change. Before she left the store, she took a look at herself in the mirror and fell into a trance for a moment. Surprisingly, she looked not old at all. The boss looked at her and said, I dare guarantee it. In the entire Philadelphia, there is not a single person who can wear such an elegant and dignified attire. If someone else wears this attire, perhaps she will look old and mature. But you have an indescribable gentleness and generosity. That is the temperament of a lady from a noble family. Mr. Walton's taste is indeed good. She looked at him and the corners of her mouth slightly curled up. No wonder he could open a clothing store. He really knew how to talk. The driver drove her to an ancient private villa on the side of the mountain. Because William Walton had not arrived yet, she waited in the carriage. After a few minutes, someone knocked on the window and opened the door for her. When she turned to look at him, she saw that it was William Walton. When she got out of the car, his gaze, like a scanner, swept up and down her body, making her uncomfortable. She frowned and said unhappily, Why are you looking at me like that? William Walton moved closer to her ear and said, I want to hide you from others. This woman's body had curves. Why did she look so beautiful all the time? She slanted at him. You were the one who picked these clothes. Don't pity me. William Walton lightly tapped her forehead with his finger. What the hell are you thinking? I'm praising you. She looked at him. It was your choice of clothes. Even I look ugly. You should at least try to keep on praising me. Why are you so unconfident? You look very dignified in these clothes. When she saw the certainty in his eyes, she blushed. Where are we? William Walton hugged her waist immediately. This is the home of the old man I was talking about. He is my good brother Derek's grandfather. He is someone who has fought for the country and has great authority in Philadelphia. He is the highest-ranking officer in this city. When she heard this, she felt deep veneration for him in her heart. He rang the doorbell, and the old butler came out and ushered the two into the villa. Walking along the winding stone steps for more than 10 meters, they finally arrived at a courtyard that was covered with grass. There were already many people in the courtyard, noisily socializing with each other. Although she didn't know who the old man was, she was the first to notice John Anderson and his family within the crowd. She was surprised that they were here. Chapter 134. Laura is a slut. She turned her head to look at William Walton, who was beside her. Feeling her gaze, he looked back. I don't know why they're here either. From his expression, she could tell that he really didn't know. After all, his hatred towards the Anderson family was no less than hers. Are we going to stay here? The one who invited me was the old man. Since I was young, the old man has always been kind to me. I have to show my respect. He put his arm around her waist and walked inside. Betty Anderson walked over while giggling. She was wearing a white short dress. Because her chest was pressed down too low, the two lumps of flesh seemed as if they could leap out at any time. When Laura saw her like this, she felt disgusted. But Betty Anderson was different, smiling happily. She looked at her warmly. Laura, you've also come. What a coincidence. To be able to meet you here, isn't that a coincidence? With a cold face, she said, I feel like I didn't check the calendar when I went out. Betty Anderson was not angry either, and said with a kind look, Girl, why do you love to be angry? I didn't say anything. You're already a big girl. Stop playing around with your childish personality. Mr. Walton will blame you. As she said that, she looked at William Walton bashfully. Mr. Walton, long time no see. William Walton raised his eyebrows. Have we met each other before? The moment he finished speaking, she lowered her head and laughed. He did it on purpose, of course. Betty Anderson said somewhat embarrassedly, Mr. Walton, you forgot, we met the last time at the club. Really? I have no impression of you. Betty Anderson was a little embarrassed and immediately replied, Laura was also present at that time. And your little brother, he was also present, right, Laura? She looked at William Walton. Really? William Walton raised his eyebrows. You're asking me? I told you, I don't remember. She looked warmly at Betty Anderson. Miss Anderson, I won't disturb you any longer. After she finished speaking, she looked at William Walton and said, I'm a little hungry. Come, I'll take you to eat something. The two circled around Betty Anderson and left, walking towards the long table to eat. Betty Anderson turned around, gnashing her teeth with a face full of anger. Her mother, Helen Anderson, walked over and asked in a low voice, What happened? Why did you let them leave? Betty Anderson was not in a good mood. It's all because of that slut. She has been causing trouble all this time. That bitch actually dared to ruin my daughter's good fortune. I won't forgive her. Betty Anderson looked at her mother. Look at that slut. She is leaning so close to Mr. Walton. How am I supposed to develop my relationship with him? Don't worry, we'll just wait and see. Betty Anderson angrily followed Helen Anderson back to his father's side. A few minutes later, the old man walked out of the villa with the support of the old steward. Everyone gathered around to make small talk, and upon seeing that William Walton did not move, Laura asked curiously, "Why are you not going over? Didn't you say that the old man treats you well?" "There are so many people. Annoying. Wait a moment, there's no hurry." The crowd gradually dispersed from the old man's side. The old man's gaze fell on William Walton. William Walton smiled and said to her, "Follow me." After she put down the food in her hands, she followed William Walton to the side of the old man. "Grandfather, how have you been recently?" The old man patted him on the shoulder. "I'm in good health. You brat, it has been half a month since you last came back to see me." As the old tutor spoke, his gaze fell upon her. "Is this your girlfriend?" Laura's face turned red as she hastily waved her hands. "No, I..." Before she even finished speaking, John Anderson's outspoken laughter interrupted her words. "General, your body is really getting tougher and tougher. In terms of getting stronger with age, you are second to none in Philadelphia." Hearing John Anderson's voice, she instinctively felt against it. Old General nodded at John Anderson and smiled. "Thank you." John Anderson turned around and pulled his daughter over, then said with a face full of benevolence, "General, this is my daughter Betty Anderson. She is really happy to see you today. She always admires heroes." Betty Anderson walked forward and respectfully bowed to Edward Caffrey. "Nice to meet you, grandfather." Edward Caffrey sized up Betty Anderson from head to toe and nodded his head. "Min, little girl, it's cold outside. You should wear more." Betty Anderson laughed. "Grandfather, it's all right, I'm not cold." Edward Caffrey's expression paled. At the side, the corner of William Walton's mouth revealed a hint of disdain. This woman really did not know how to get the true meaning. When she looked down at her clothes, she finally understood why William Walton wanted her to wear such a conservative attire. So it was to cater to the old tutor's thoughts. John Anderson tilted his head and glanced at Betty Anderson, then shot a look at Helen Anderson. Helen Anderson took off her white silk cloak and draped it over Betty Anderson's shoulders. "Hey, General, don't mind. This little girl is just filial piety. She was afraid that I would be cold, so she gave me her little cloak. Please forgive her for embarrassing her in front of you." At first, Betty Anderson wanted to say something, but Helen Anderson pinched her waist. Although she didn't know what she had done wrong, she still remained silent. Edward Caffrey nodded his head. "Filial piety is a good thing, but girls still need to dress properly before they can be dignified. Look at how well this girl is dressed." Edward Caffrey pointed to Laura. Betty Anderson felt a burst of anger. This old fellow was really an old geezer. She was wearing the latest dress of the season. Laura was nobody. Seeing Betty Anderson's angry expression, she smiled and bowed to the old man. "Thank you, General." Edward Caffrey nodded. He looked at William Walton. "William, I have something that I want to talk about with you alone. Come in with me." William Walton said to Laura, "You come in as well." Laura shook her head. "There's no need. You can go in. I'll go eat something by myself." She wasn't stupid. The old man had already said that they'd talk alone. William Walton smiled and nodded. The two of them entered the living room and sat down. The old butler brewed tea for them. The old man said, "William, I heard from Derek that you don't have a girlfriend yet." William Walton smirked. "Derek told you that? He doesn't have a girlfriend as well." "That brat always has a stern face. Whichever girl dares to follow him, I'm worried that before I die, I'll be able to see him marry a wife and carry a great-grandchild." "Grandfather, don't say that. He is attractive." "Let's not talk about that brat. The reason I called you over tonight is to repay a kindness." "What?" "That's right. When I was young, I owed that old man from the Anderson clan a favor. I didn't even pay back this favor until he left. You know I don't want to owe others, ah?" "A few days ago, that son-in-law of his came looking for me and said he hopes for me to act as a matchmaker. After asking around, I found out that the person his daughter has set her eyes on is you." Chapter 135. Throw me to the wolves. William Walton smiled. "Grandpa, please don't." "Don't worry, I just want to repay this favor." That John Anderson felt that, since your two families have some grudges, it's not good for him to say it out loud, so he wanted to find an intermediary to help them raise it. Probably because no one was more suitable than me, he came to find me. As for me, that's exactly what I'm in charge of. As for whether or not it'll work, that's not my business. Since I've already returned the favor, there's no need for you to make things difficult. Do you understand what I mean?" William Walton nodded with a smile. "I knew it. You won't throw me to the wolves since I hate them so much. This brat, your grandfather, isn't that black-hearted. It's not like I didn't see the girl from the Anderson family just now. Look at her clothes. I think someone from a good family won't wear that." She didn't understand me at all. At a glance, I could tell that she wasn't very smart, but her eyes were sharp like a thief as she looked around blindly. "I like that little girl you brought. She's cute and dressed appropriately. From what I see, her personality is also very stable. You made a great choice." William Walton raised his eyebrows. "What's the use of making great choice? She hasn't accepted me." "What, that girl didn't like you?" William Walton laughed speechlessly. "Grandfather, it's not good to gossip like that. That's impossible. Look at you. You are handsome. The most important thing is that you're the CEO of a listed company. If I had a granddaughter, I'd want to give her to your family. How could this girl look down on you? This girl doesn't like me, nor does she like my money. I arranged a job for her in my company, but she doesn't care too much about it. That's why I feel she is so valuable." The old man laughed out loud. "Indeed it is rare, even if an old man like me were alive, I would still be able to meet with things like this. Such an outstanding William Walton can even be disliked by women." "Grandpa." William Walton laughed helplessly. Seeing that, the old man joked. "How about this? Why don't you introduce her to Derek and give it a try? I think that young lady has a good temper, maybe she and Derek." "Grandfather, if you really say it like that, then I won't be happy." William Walton pretended to be angry. "Derek is my friend, and Laura is the girl who I like. If that brat Derek dares to have any ideas about a woman I like, I will beat him up." "You brat, are you serious this time?" William Walton nodded with a smile. "I'm serious." "All right, then I'll be waiting your wedding." William Walton smiled. "Grandfather, you can rest assured. It won't be long before I can let you attend to my wedding. There's no need for you to say anything about the Anderson clan. I'll do as I see fit. I didn't intend to cause trouble for you in the first place." William Walton nodded. "Okay." He took the teacup from the old steward and poured a cup of tea for the old man. In the courtyard, when Betty Anderson and her mother saw Laura was alone, they huddled together and whispered a few words to each other. Betty Anderson nodded repeatedly, and then the two walked towards the direction of Laura. With a kind face, she took her arm and smiled. "Laura, I have a few words I want to tell you." "I have nothing to say to you," she said, tugging her arm out. But on one side, Helen followed. She held onto her warm other arm with a smile on her face, but a voice that was filled with hatred. "Laura, don't refuse our kindness. If we cause trouble here, and not only did the Anderson family lose face, Mr. Walton lost all face because of you." No longer struggling, she walked with them around the front yard and into the back. After entering the backyard, she shook them off. "Bitch, do you really think you're that amazing? You actually dare to occupy Mr. Walton without letting go? I think you're just trying to follow in your mother's footsteps." "Helen Anderson, don't pull that shit on me. William Walton isn't your daughter's. She doesn't care about her dignity, so she hopped in him while she saw William Walton. Why not teach your daughter a lesson? I think you should take care of your own daughter first." Helen Anderson, hearing her retort, lifted her hand to slap her, but she wouldn't let her do it. She grabbed Helen's wrist and took a step forward, her eyes glaring at her. "Helen, open your eyes wide for me to see. I am Laura Green, not Elizabeth Green. She will allow you to beat her up as you wish, but I won't. In the future, when you see me, you better respect me a little. If you do not believe, just do it, and I will show you my attitude." A sharp gaze was fixed on her face. Looking at her, Helen Anderson felt an inexplicable sense of nervousness. This bitch was indeed different from her mother. The determination in her eyes was frightening. Seeing that, Betty Anderson stepped forward and pulled her hand. "You are a shameless woman." Laura struggled. Because Betty Anderson was wearing high heels, she unsteadily staggered a few steps back and directly fell into the pool behind her. Although the water was not deep, she was instantly soaked. Upon seeing this, Helen Anderson hurriedly screamed out, "Ah, Laura, what are you doing? Even you're not happy, how can you push her away?" Her screams drew attention. Betty Anderson stood in the water, crying as she slapped the water twice. "Laura, I just don't want you to go against my mother. What did I do wrong? You want to push me down. You're really going too far like this, do you know?" She looked at where she was standing, and then looked at the pool about 4 or 5 meters away from her. She heaved a sigh of relief. This was a good show, the two of them acting on their own. It was truly amazing. She gave a cold laugh. John Anderson walked over. Seeing this scene, John Anderson hurriedly took off his suit jacket and handed it over to Betty Anderson. "Betty, quickly put it on." Betty Anderson lowered her head. Only then did she realize that because she was wearing a dress that wiped her chest, her body was now soaked with water, and her cape was stuck to the side of her shoulder in a transparent manner. Her skirt had become heavy from absorbing water, and a large half of her chest had been exposed. Such a lady from a noble family had been seen half naked in the public. She grabbed John Anderson's clothes and draped them over her shoulders. After she was pulled ashore by the servants, she plopped down on the ground and started to wail. She used her father's clothes to tightly wrap herself up and looked at Laura. "Laura, why did you push me into the water? Do you really hate me that much?" John Anderson was stifled in his heart as he walked in front of her. "You shouldn't have pushed someone into the water, even you dislike her. Seeing her in such a sorry state, are you satisfied?" She clenched her fists and bit her lips as she looked at him. Just as she was about to speak, William Walton, who was in the living room, heard the servant report and hurried over. He saw that Laura was being pointed at and standing in the crowd, but she was looking at John Anderson stubbornly, and he passed through the crowd and came to her side.